Our neighborhood wasn't your typical suburban paradise. It had a mix of sprawling lawns, elegant homes, and an HOA that thought it was running a small dictatorship. The self-appointed enforcers of this regime? A group of middle-aged volunteers with egos larger than their golf carts. They called themselves the HOA security team, complete with faux uniforms and badges they probably ordered online. My wife, Elena, and I had moved here a few months ago. As an ex-military officer turned elite self-defense trainer, Elena had a commanding presence, but she kept a low profile. She wasn't one to broadcast her credentials, and most of the neighbors just saw her as the quiet, athletic woman who jogged around the block every morning. The HOA had been mostly a mild annoyance until the day they decided to escalate things. It started with a letter. Violation of HOA rules. Unapproved fence design. I held up the paper, squinting at it. Since when do fences need approval? Elena glanced over my shoulder and rolled her eyes. Let me guess, Karen? Karen was the HOA president, a woman with an uncanny ability to turn the smallest infractions into federal crimes. She had already sent letters about our mailbox being too rustic and the color of our garage door not being community compliant. Maybe we should attend the next meeting, I suggested. Elena smirked. I think we both know that won't make a difference. She was right, of course. But I wasn't prepared for what happened next. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon, and Elena was in the backyard teaching our neighbor's teenage daughter some basic self-defense moves. The girl had been nervous about walking home alone after dark, and Elena, ever the compassionate one, offered to help. I was working on fixing a sprinkler when I heard voices, loud, confrontational ones. I looked up to see two members of the HOA security team walking into our yard. Both men were in their late 40s, wearing black polo shirts with the HOA logo stitched onto the chest. One of them had a clipboard, the other a smug grin that instantly grated on my nerves. Excuse me, the clipboard guy barked, this is a violation of HOA rules. You can't conduct unauthorized activities on your property. Elena stopped mid-instruction and turned to face them, calm but clearly unimpressed. Unauthorized activities? Martial arts training, the smug one said. It's disruptive to the neighborhood. Elena raised an eyebrow. We're in our own backyard. How exactly is this disruptive? It's against HOA regulations, clipboard guy snapped. And you need to stop immediately. I walked over, trying to defuse the situation. Look guys, she's just helping a neighbor. There's no harm in this. Smug guy scoffed. Rules are rules. If you don't comply, we'll have to take further action. Elena crossed her arms. Further action? Like what? Clipboard guy puffed up his chest. We'll be forced to call in enforcement. She tilted her head. Enforcement? You mean the actual police? No, smug guy said with a smirk. HOA security. Us. For a moment, the yard was silent. Then Elena let out a soft laugh. Oh, I'd love to see how that works out for you. Her tone clearly rattled them, and they muttered something about escalating the matter before storming off. That evening, as we sat on the porch sipping iced tea, Elena seemed unbothered by the encounter. But I had a nagging feeling that this wasn't over. The HOA wasn't known for backing down gracefully, and these self-proclaimed enforcers had just been publicly challenged. Elena, I said, breaking the silence, what happens if they actually show up again? She leaned back, a small, mischievous smile playing on her lips. Then I guess they'll learn the hard way that intimidation only works if you know what you're doing. It wasn't a threat, just a statement of fact. And while I trusted her to handle anything they threw our way, I couldn't shake the feeling that this clash was far from finished. You said. The next few days passed quietly, too quietly. Karen and her HOA lackeys didn't send their usual barrage of letters, and no one showed up to take photos of our property violations. For a moment I thought they'd finally gotten the message. That illusion shattered one evening when I returned from the hardware store to find Elena standing in the driveway, arms crossed, her expression steely. Behind her, two HOA security team golf carts were parked at odd angles, blocking the street. What's going on? I asked, setting the bags down. They're inside, Elena said, her voice calm but tense. Inside. I repeated, incredulous. She nodded. They let themselves in. Apparently, they've decided to inspect the house for rule violations. My jaw clenched. Please tell me you didn't let them do this. Elena gave a dry laugh. Oh, I didn't. They used some kind of key or lock-picking trick. I was in the backyard when it happened. I turned to head inside, but she grabbed my arm. Wait. You need to know something. What? One of them pulled a gun, she said flatly. My blood ran cold. Are you serious? Elena's eyes hardened. Dead serious. The smug one, you remember him, thought flashing a weapon would scare me. It didn't work. I stared at her, trying to process what she'd just said. What did you do? She shrugged. Disarmed him. Took the gun apart. It's in the garage now. I blinked. Wait, you just took it apart? She raised an eyebrow. It's not exactly rocket science. Despite the absurdity of the situation, I couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. Elena had been in more high-pressure situations than most people could imagine, and she handled them with the kind of grace that made action heroes look clumsy. Still, this was a line crossed. I stepped inside, Elena close behind, to find the two HOA cops, standing in my living room, clipboard guy nervously clutching his notes while smug guy nursed his wrist. Explain, I said, my voice low and firm. Clipboard guy stammered, we were conducting a compliance inspection. Standard procedure. In my house. I snapped. Without my permission? Smug guy tried to regain his composure. We have authority under HOA rules to ensure all properties meet regulations. I pointed to the security camera in the corner. You're trespassing. And breaking and entering. The cameras caught everything. Elena stepped forward, her presence immediately silencing their weak excuses. And pulling a gun on me? She said quietly, her tone lethal. What rule were you enforcing then? Smug guy's bravado faltered. I felt threatened. Elena laughed, a sharp, cold sound. Threatened? By what? My water hose. Clipboard guy nudged his partner. Maybe we should just leave. You're not going anywhere, I said, pulling out my phone. Not until the real police get here. 10 minutes later, 2 squad cars pulled up. The officers who stepped out were professionals, and their expressions grew grim as Elena calmly explained what had happened. These two entered our home without permission, she said, gesturing to the HOA enforcers. One of them pulled a firearm. I disarmed him and secured the weapon in the garage. The officer frowned. Ma'am, do you have the weapon? Elena nodded, disappearing into the garage and returning with the disassembled parts. She handed them over without a word, her movements precise and deliberate. The officers turned to the HOA pair. Is this true? Smug guy sputtered. We were enforcing community rules. It was perfectly legal. The officer didn't look convinced. Do you have any legal documentation giving you authority to enter someone's home or brandish a weapon? Clipboard guy shook his head, his face pale. Thought so, the officer said. Turn around. Hands behind your back. Smug guy's protests were drowned out by the click of handcuffs. Clipboard guy didn't even try to resist. As they were led to the patrol cars, Karen herself came running up the street, her heels clicking furiously. What is going on here? She demanded. You can't arrest them, they're HOA security. The officer turned to her. Ma'am, they committed trespassing, breaking and entering, and unlawful possession of a firearm. HOA security or not, they're under arrest. Karen looked like she might explode. I'll have your badge for this. Elena stepped forward, smiling faintly. Good luck with that. Karen froze, finally noticing Elena's calm demeanor and the way the officers treated her with respect. Who are you? Elena leaned in just enough to make Karen uncomfortable. Someone you shouldn't have messed with. Karen's face turned an interesting shade of red as the squad cars drove away. As the chaos settled, I turned to Elena. Think that's the last we'll hear from Karen? Elena smiled faintly. Not a chance. But next time she'll think twice. She was probably right. But for the first time since moving here, I felt like the tide was finally turning in our favor. You said. Right, chap 3. If there was one thing Karen hated more than losing control, it was losing face in front of the entire neighborhood. The arrests of her self-proclaimed HOA cops sent shockwaves through the community. For most residents, it was a wake-up call to Karen's overreach. But for Karen, it was a challenge, a blow to her authority she was determined to avenge. The morning after the incident, we woke to find an official-looking notice taped to our door. Notice of immediate eviction, due to non-compliance with HOA regulations. Elena read it out loud, her lips curling into a smirk. She's really trying this? She must think she's a sheriff from some old Western movie, I said, rolling my eyes. The notice claimed we were in violation of multiple HOA rules, including harboring aggressive animals, a stray cat we occasionally fed, hosting unauthorized combat training, Elena's self-defense lessons, and obstructing HOA security duties, read, defending our home from her lackeys. She's doubling down, I said. What do you want to do? Elena folded the notice neatly and set it aside. Let her come. I've got time today. Sure enough, Karen arrived later that afternoon with her clipboard, flanked by 2 new recruits from the HOA. These ones weren't in faux uniforms, but their stiff postures and nervous glances suggested they'd been roped into her latest scheme. Karen didn't bother knocking. She marched right up to the front yard, pointing dramatically at the house as if it were a condemned fortress. This property is in violation of HOA rules, she announced. You are hereby evicted effective immediately. I stepped onto the porch, suppressing a grin. Karen, you don't have the authority to evict anyone. That's where you're wrong, she said smugly. The HOA board has voted unanimously to revoke your residency. Interesting, Elena said, appearing beside me. Because last I checked, HOA bylaws don't override state property laws. You can't evict us from a house we own. Karen's face twitched, but she recovered quickly. Then I'll escalate this to court. Please do, Elena said, crossing her arms. And while you're at it, explain why your so-called HOA cops are sitting in jail for trespassing and unlawful use of a firearm. Karen's smug demeanor faltered for a moment, but she pressed on. You've been a disruptive presence in this community since you arrived. Your behavior is unacceptable. Unacceptable? Elena echoed. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it that made Karen take a step back. Let me tell you what's unacceptable. Breaking into someone's home. Pulling a weapon on them. And wasting police resources because your ego can't handle being challenged. The 2 HOA recruits shifted uncomfortably, clearly regretting their decision to follow Karen here. Karen opened her mouth to retort, but Elena held up a hand. You've had your say. Now it's my turn. She stepped off the porch, standing eye to eye with Karen. You think you're in control because you wave that clipboard around and bark orders? But you've crossed a line you can't come back from. The law isn't on your side, Karen. And neither is this neighborhood. Karen's face reddened. You think you can intimidate me? I'm the HOA president. For now, Elena said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. But not for long. That evening we hosted a neighborhood meeting at our house. Word had spread quickly about the incident with the HOA cops, and the turnout was better than we'd expected. One by one, neighbors shared their grievances, unjust fines, arbitrary rules, and years of Karen's overreach. It didn't take long for a consensus to form. Karen's time as HOA president needed to end. Elena and I led the charge, gathering signatures to call for an emergency vote of no confidence. As the list of names grew, so did the sense of solidarity among the residents. This isn't just about us, Elena said to the crowd. It's about taking back control of our community. Karen has abused her position for too long, and it's time we hold her accountable. The room erupted in applause. As the meeting wrapped up, one neighbor approached Elena with a hesitant smile. You really rattled her today, he said. Think she'll back down? Elena shook her head. Karen doesn't know when to quit. But that's fine. Neither do I. The stage was set for the final showdown. Karen thought she could scare us into submission, but she'd underestimated just how determined this neighborhood had become. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for a Friday evening, and by the time it rolled around, the tension in the air was palpable. Neighbors who had avoided HOA politics for years showed up, eager to witness Karen's reckoning. Even those who had once sided with her were now questioning their allegiance. Karen arrived fashionably late, clipboard in hand and an air of forced confidence. Her expression soured the moment she realized how large the crowd was, and how few friendly faces were in it. Let's get this over with, she snapped as she marched to the front of the room. Emma, the neighbor who had volunteered to moderate the meeting, gave her a polite but firm smile. As per the agenda, we'll begin with statements regarding your leadership, Karen. Residents will have the floor. Karen scoffed. Fine. Let's hear what the peanut gallery has to say. The first few neighbors spoke hesitantly, recounting instances of unfair fines and petty enforcement. But as the meeting went on, the stories became bolder and more damning. She fined me $500 for parking my RV in my own driveway, even though the bylaws don't prohibit it, one man said. She replaced my garden fence without my permission and charged me for it, another woman added. Then it was Elena's turn. She rose from her seat, the room going silent as she stepped forward. Karen, Elena began, her tone even, we've tolerated your behavior for far too long. You've harassed, bullied, and manipulated this community under the guise of enforcing rules. But what you did last week crossed a line no one should ever cross. Karen bristled. I did nothing wrong. Nothing wrong? Elena echoed, her voice rising. Your so-called HOA cops broke into my house, pulled a gun on me and tried to intimidate me into compliance. That's not just wrong, it's criminal. Karen's face reddened as the crowd murmured in agreement. I have here, Elena continued, holding up a folder, a signed statement from the locksmith you coerced into changing residents' locks without their consent, invoices showing your misuse of HOA funds, and a copy of the police report from last week's incident. This is not leadership, it's abuse of power. The room erupted into applause. Karen opened her mouth to retort, but no sound came out. The vote of no confidence was swift and decisive. Of the 46 residents present, 45 voted in favor of removing Karen as HOA president. The lone dissenting vote was, unsurprisingly, Karen's own. When the results were announced, Karen stood frozen in disbelief. You can't do this, she shouted, her voice shrill. I built this community. You're nothing without me. Karen, Emma said gently, it's over. The aftermath of Karen's removal was almost anticlimactic. The new HOA board quickly amended the bylaws to prevent future abuse of power, and the neighborhood began to heal. Karen, however, didn't go quietly. She tried to rally support from outside the community, filing frivolous lawsuits and spreading rumors. None of it stuck. The final nail in her coffin came when local news picked up the story. A segment titled, "The HOA Tyrant Who Went Too Far" aired, detailing her reign and ultimate downfall. After that, Karen disappeared from public view, leaving the neighborhood in peace. A few weeks later, Elena and I sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the cul-de-sac. The air felt lighter, the tension of the past months finally gone. Think she'll ever come back? I asked. Elena chuckled. Not unless she's ready to face this community again. And I doubt she has the guts for that. I smiled, raising my glass of iced tea. To a Karen-free neighborhood. Elena clinked her glass against mine. I'll drink to that. The battle had been hard fought, but in the end, justice prevailed. Karen's reign was over, and the neighborhood was ours again. You said,